The Archaeological Institute of Advanced Species occupied what could only be described as an unnecessarily dramatic space station. Kepler-7 hung in the void, like a crystalline soap bubble that someone had decided to fill with pretentious scholars and artifacts from civilizations that had the common decency to go extinct quietly. The station's designers, a collective of Valorian architects who'd apparently never met a right angle they didn't want to replace with a sweeping curve, had created something that looked like a frozen scream made of glass and regret. Inside this monument to academic excess, the Hall of Lost Civilizations stretched for nearly 2 kilometers. It was the Institute's crown jewel, a carefully curated collection of failure. Each display case contained remnants of species who'd reached for the stars and found only the cold embrace of oblivion. The galaxy, it turned out, was littered with the cosmic equivalent of "I told you so" moments. And the Institute had made it their business to collect them all. Professor Zethrador, a Kalenian whose head resembled a flower that had given up on life, guided his students through the exhibits with the enthusiasm of someone reading insurance policy fine print. His 7 eye stalks drooped with boredom as he gestured toward a display containing what looked like melted technological components. "The Breshnari Compact," he droned, his translator rendering his natural clicking language into something approximating interest. Achieved faster than light travel approximately 15,000 years ago. They celebrated by immediately flying their entire fleet into a black hole. Moving on. The tour group shuffled forward with varying degrees of attention. There were 3 Valorians who floated rather than walked, their gossamer bodies shimmering as they whispered about weekend plans. A pair of Dronthian heavy-worlders lumbered along, their thick scales scraping against each other with sounds like grinding machinery. One Quarzan, the species that looked distressingly like upright catfish with too many opinions, was actually taking notes, which made them either the most dedicated student or the most tragic. And then there was Kayla Martinez, the only human in the advanced xenoarchaeology course, who was discovering that being the sole representative of your species in an academic setting meant constantly fighting the urge to either over-apologize for existing or over-explain everything humanity had ever done. She'd chosen a middle path, showing up, keeping her head down, and trying not to think about how the cafeteria's human-compatible nutrition paste tasted like what would happen if sadness could be extruded through a tube. She wasn't paying much attention to Zethrador's lecture. She'd learned that approximately 70% of xenoarchaeology consisted of academics saying, "We don't know," in increasingly elaborate ways, then publishing papers about their uncertainty. The other 30% was arguing about what ancient aliens had for breakfast based on a single corroded spoon. They stopped at the next exhibit, and something made Kayla's attention snap back like a rubber band. The display case contained a collection of artifacts arranged with museum-quality precision. Fragments of metal alloy, shards of what might have been ceramic, a remarkably preserved banner made of synthetic fiber, and a seal, circular, about the size of her palm, with an engraving that made her blood run cold and her confusion run hot. "The vanished precursor civilization," Zethrador announced with slightly more energy, which meant he sounded like someone deeply tired instead of someone clinically dead. "One of our most fascinating exhibits. These artifacts date to approximately 50,000 years before present, discovered on 17 different worlds across the Orion Arm. Advanced metallurgy, evidence of faster-than-light capability, and a sophisticated understanding of quantum mechanics. They vanished completely, leaving only these scattered remnants. Some theorize they ascended to a higher dimensional plane. Others suggest they encountered something that wiped them out utterly. The mystery remains." "Why is my family crest on that seal?" Kayla interrupted, The silence that followed could have been weaponized. Zethrador's eye stalks swiveled toward her with the slow mechanical precision of security cameras tracking a suspect. The other students turned, various appendages and sensory organs focusing on the human who just committed the cardinal sin of interrupting a lecture. "I beg your pardon?" Zethrador's translator somehow managed to convey condescension across species barriers, which was honestly impressive. Kayla stepped closer to the display case, her heart doing interesting acrobatic maneuvers in her chest. She pointed at the seal, specifically at the engraving. A stylized tree with 7 branches, roots that formed a geometric pattern, and 3 stars arranged in a triangle above it. Below the tree, barely visible, were characters that her brain translated automatically because she'd seen them her entire life, on everything from her grandmother's jewelry to her uncle's frankly terrible back tattoo. That's my family crest. The Martinez family crest. That specific design has been in my family for... She did quick mental math that felt increasingly unhinged. Well, we can trace it back about 800 years in the records. But oral tradition says it's older. Why is it on a 50,000-year-old artifact? One of the Valorians made a sound like wind chimes, having a nervous breakdown. The Quarzen's note-taking stylus fell from their thin hand and clattered on the floor. Zethrador's eye stalks contracted slightly, the Kalenian equivalent of a dismissive eye roll. "Cadet Martinez, I understand that humans have a tendency toward pattern recognition that borders on the pathological. But I assure you this is coincidence. The mathematical probability of..." "It's not just the tree," Kayla continued, her voice taking on an edge that surprised her. She'd been so careful to be the agreeable human, the one who didn't make waves. But apparently, there were limits. Those characters at the bottom, they're not unknown script. That's literally Latin. It says, "Fortis et fidelis," strong and faithful. That's been my family motto since forever. The silence upgraded from weaponizable to thermonuclear. "That's preposterous," Zethrador said. But his translator was doing something interesting with the intonation, adding a slight tremor that suggested the professor was less certain than he wanted to appear. The linguistic analysis conducted by the Institute's premier xenolinguists determined that script to be a completely unknown writing system with no connection to any contemporary language. The paper was peer-reviewed and published in the Journal of Ancient Texts and... "Did your premier xenolinguists?" Kayla said, pulling out her phone. Because of course she had her phone, humanity's relationship with personal communication devices was basically a psychological dependency at this point. Happened to check if it was just regular old dead human language? Because I can pull up literally 1,000 examples right now. She tapped her screen, pulled up her photo gallery, and scrolled to a picture from her cousin's wedding last year. There, clear as day on the decorative banner hanging behind the ceremony space, was the exact same crest. She held up the phone to the display case, and the match was perfect. Not similar, not reminiscent, identical. The Quarzen made a sound like a garbage disposal trying to process silverware. "This must be examined more carefully," Zethrador said, his eye stalks now fully contracted in what Kayla was learning to recognize as Kalenian distress. "The display has been here for 30 years. Thousands of researchers have studied these artifacts. If there were any connection to contemporary humanity, someone would have noticed." "Or," Kayla said, her brain now running on pure adrenaline and the kind of reckless certainty that came from being absolutely right about something absurd. "None of those researchers bothered asking a human because you all thought we were too primitive to have any useful input on ancient civilizations." The accuracy of this statement was confirmed by the way every alien in the corridor, suddenly became very interested in the floor, ceiling, or their own appendages. "I need to speak with the head curator," Kayla said. "Right now." The office of Dr. Velkara Thunsept was exactly what happened when you gave an academic unlimited budget and no adult supervision. The Nexari curator had apparently decided that if her office couldn't make visitors feel intellectually inadequate through achievement alone, she'd accomplish it through interior design. Shelves lined every wall, crammed with artifacts, publications, and what Kayla suspected were just fancy rocks that Velkara couldn't bear to throw away. The desk was a slab of polished xanthorium, a material so expensive that using it for furniture was basically a war crime against economics. Velkara herself was a sight to behold. 3 meters tall, with 6 arms that she used to simultaneously review documents, gesture dramatically, and hold various beverages. Her species had evolved on a high-gravity world, which meant she looked like she could bench press a shuttle and probably had. Her face, if you could call it that, was a smooth obsidian surface with bioluminescent patterns that shifted with her mood. Currently, they were pulsing an angry orange. "Let me understand this correctly," Velkara said, her voice resonating from somewhere in her thorax. "You're suggesting that our most prestigious exhibit, an exhibit that has attracted researchers from 200 star systems, that has been the subject of 17 doctoral dissertations, that secured us funding for the next decade, is actually just human garbage from your species' first attempt at spaceflight?" "Well," Kayla said, trying to find a diplomatic way to phrase it and failing, "when you put it like that, yes. But it's not garbage. It's heritage. There's a difference." "There is no difference." Velkara's bioluminescence flared white-hot. "We've carbon-dated these materials. Isotope analysis confirms they're 50,000 years old. Unless you're suggesting that humans are actually far older than your own historical records indicate. I mean, we did have a Bronze Age that we mysteriously forgot about for a while," Kayla said. "Civilizations collapse. Stuff gets lost. We're not great at keeping track of things long-term. We once lost an entire Roman legion and still don't know where it went." Professor Zethrador, who'd been standing in the corner like a particularly nervous plant, made a sound like wind through dead leaves. "Dr. Thunsept, perhaps we should conduct additional analysis before—" "Additional analysis?" Velkara's luminescence went purple with indignation. She grabbed a data pad with one hand while gesticulating wildly with 3 others, nearly knocking over what looked like a priceless vase from the Shentari dynasty. "We've conducted every test known to modern science: spectroscopy, radiometric dating, molecular analysis, quantum resonance mapping." "Did you try asking a human?" Kayla interrupted. The silence was starting to feel familiar. "Because," Kayla continued, warming to her theme and realizing she'd reached the point of no return, "I can identify at least 6 other items in that display case that are definitely human. That ceremonial vessel with the unknown purpose? That's a wine cup. Specifically, it's a chalice design from the Iberian Peninsula, probably used for celebrations or religious ceremonies. Those protein residue fragments of unknown origin? Those are chicken bones. We ate a lot of chicken, still do. It's our thing." Velkara's bioluminescence cycled through several colors that probably meant something unflattering. She manipulated the data pad with increasing violence, pulling up images of the artifacts in question. The isotopic signature of those chicken bones shows a ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12 that indicates that they're 50,000 years old. "Yeah, I get it," Kayla said. "But chickens are chickens. Gallus domesticus. We've been dragging them around with us for like 10,000 years of recorded history, probably longer. if we went to space 50 millennia ago, we absolutely brought chickens. We probably brought them before we brought adequate food supplies for ourselves. One of Velkara's hands was now massaging what Kayla assumed was her equivalent of a temple. This is absurd. The technological sophistication indicated by these artifacts suggests a civilization at least 1,000 years more advanced than current humanity. The metallurgy alone. Can I see the metallurgy analysis? Kayla asked. Velkara, possibly because she was too stunned to refuse, handed over the data pad. Kayla scrolled through the report, her expression growing increasingly incredulous. This is a titanium steel alloy, with trace elements of chromium and nickel. You know what we call this now? Surgical steel. We use it for medical implants and kitchen utensils. It's not mysterious, ancient super technology. It's what happens when you try to make something that doesn't rust. The quantum resonance signature, Velkara tried, is probably from whatever engine system they were using, Kayla said, her confidence growing with every word. Look, I'm not an engineer, but humanity has tried and failed at space colonization at least once in our history. The timeline actually makes sense. You've got artifacts scattered across 17 worlds in the Orion Arm. That's where Earth is. We probably had a couple hundred years of space travel, established colonies. Something went catastrophically wrong. War, plague, economic collapse. We're really good at those. And the survivors limped back to Earth and started over. That's an extraordinary claim, Zethrador said quietly. Is it? Kayla turned to face him. Is it really? Or is it just extraordinary because you all assumed humans were too young and too stupid to have done this before? We've been spacefaring again for what, 300 years? And everyone treats us like we're children playing with our parents' tools. Meanwhile, you've got artifacts that are clearly human, with human writing, human designs, human food waste, and nobody connected the dots, because it was easier to believe in mysterious precursors than to admit humans might have been here before. The office went silent, except for the soft hum of the station's environmental systems. Velkara set down the data pad with one hand, while the others hung limply at her sides. Her bioluminescence had faded to a defeated gray. If this is true, and I'm not, and conceding that it is, the implications are staggering. We'd have to retract papers, refund grants, redesign the entire exhibit. My reputation would survive, Kayla said, surprising herself with something approaching sympathy. Look, science is about updating your understanding when new evidence appears, right? This is just new evidence. Really inconvenient, personally embarrassing new evidence. But still. There's another possibility, Zethrador said, his eye stalks perking up with something resembling hope. Perhaps this is convergent evolution, parallel development. The odds of a family crest surviving 50,000 years are actually pretty good if you're talking about humans, Kayla interrupted. We're weirdly sentimental about symbols. There are families that still use heraldic crests from Earth's medieval period. That's over 1,000 years of continuity. If some of the colony survivors made it back to Earth, they'd have brought their symbols with them, taught them to their children, carved them on things. We're very big on carving our names on stuff. It's practically a species trait. Velkara made a sound like tectonic plates arguing. I need proof, real proof. Not just pattern matching and coincidence. Fine, Kayla said, pulling out her phone again. Let me call my grandmother. The two academics stared at her. You're going to call your grandmother? Velkara repeated slowly. She's the family historian. Obsessive about it, actually. Drives everyone crazy at reunions. If anyone would know about ancient family records, it's Abuela. Kayla was already scrolling through her contacts. Fair warning, she's going to be thrilled about this. She's been telling everyone for years that the Martinez line is ancient and important. We all thought she was just being dramatic. The call connected. The holographic display showed an elderly woman with steel-gray hair, sitting in what appeared to be a kitchen, surrounded by papers and very old books. "Mija, why are you calling? Is everything okay? Are you eating enough? That space station food is terrible, I know. I'll send you another care package." "Abuela, I'm fine," Kayla said, unable to suppress a smile. "But I need to ask you something weird. The family crest, with the tree and the stars. How old is it really?" Her grandmother's expression shifted to something between pride and vindication. "Finally, someone wants to know. I've been trying to tell you all for years. That crest dates back to before the old Earth collapse. I have documentation. Actual documentation, not just stories." Kayla's heart stopped. "The what?" "The old Earth collapse. When our ancestors came back from the colony worlds. It's all in the family archives. Your great-great..." She paused to count on her fingers. "Many times, great-grandfather was an administrator on one of the colony ships. When things fell apart, he helped coordinate the return to Earth. Brought the family seal with him, along with a bunch of other survivors. It's all documented. I've been trying to get historians to look at it. But everyone says it's just family mythology." The office had gone so quiet that Kayla could hear her own heartbeat. "Abuela," she said carefully, "what year does the documentation say this happened?" "Oh, let me check." There was rustling of papers off screen. Here it is. The colony period lasted from approximately 48,000 BCE to 47,200 BCE, Earth relative dating. 800 years of expansion, then complete societal collapse. Classic overextension. We tried to colonize too fast, spread too thin, and... Could you send me those documents?" Kayla interrupted, her voice shaking slightly. "Of course. I've been digitizing them. Nobody wants to read them, but I've been doing it anyway. I'll send everything. There are ship manifests, colony records, personal journals. Your ancestor kept very detailed journals. He was very concerned with making sure future generations knew what happened, so we wouldn't repeat the mistakes." Her grandmother paused. "Mija, why are you asking about this now?" "Because I'm standing in a museum looking at Grandpa Martinez's stuff, and nobody believed it was ours." Her grandmother's expression cycled through confusion, understanding, and then pure joy. "I knew it. I knew the academic establishment was ignoring critical historical evidence. This is... Wait, is this being recorded? Am I on the official record?" "Very much so, Abuela." "Excellent. To whom it may concern, I told you so. Check your assumptions. Humans have a longer history than you think. And Kayla, Mija, make sure you get proper attribution for this discovery. Don't let them take credit for your work." "I won't, Abuela. Love you." "Love you too. Eat something." The call disconnected. Velkara had progressed through several more colors and was now settling on something between beige and existential crisis. "That was your grandmother." "That was my grandmother," Kayla confirmed. "She's going to send you approximately 800 years worth of documentation proving that humans colonized the Orion Arm 50,000 years ago, nearly destroyed ourselves, and then quietly went back to Earth to start over. You know, like you do." Zethrador's eye stalks had gone completely limp. "This will require significant revision of the accepted timeline of galactic civilization. Humans weren't primitive newcomers. You were here first. You failed, learned from it, and came back. Yeah, we tend to do that, Kayla said. Humans are really good at failing, learning absolutely nothing, failing again, then maybe learning something the third time. It's our whole thing. We're like the galaxy's most determined bad example. The exhibit will have to be completely redesigned, Velkara said. And now her bioluminescence was cycling through colors so fast it was basically a disco. This is actually extraordinary. A species that achieved interstellar civilization lost it completely and rebuilt from scratch. The resilience required, the cultural continuity, even through collapse. This is unprecedented. Is it? Kayla asked. You've got a whole museum full of civilizations that failed. We just had better luck with the failure. Some of us made it home. Most civilizations that collapse to that degree never recover. Zethrador said quietly. They fragment, devolve, lose the capacity for higher technology. Your species maintained enough cohesion to eventually rebuild. That's remarkable. We're stubborn, Kayla said. Also, apparently we're really attached to our family crests. Who knew that would be archaeologically significant? Velkara was now using all 6 arms to manipulate data pads, pulling up files, making notes, sending messages. I need to contact the board. Assemble a research team. This will require cooperation with human historians, anthropologists. We'll need access to Earth's archives, assuming they exist. Oh, they exist, Kayla assured her. We're obsessive about record keeping. Even when we're actively collapsing, we're writing stuff down about it. There are probably databases on Earth right now with information about the first colonial period that nobody's looked at because they assumed it was mythology or bad science fiction. This is going to be the largest academic scandal in the Institute's history, Zethrador said, sounding oddly excited about it. Papers will be retracted. Careers will end. It's going to be absolutely catastrophic. But accurate, Kayla pointed out. But accurate, he agreed. Velkara stopped her frantic data manipulation and turned her full attention to Kayla. You realize what this means for you, don't you? You'll be famous. The human who identified the precursor civilization as her own ancestors. There will be interviews, speaking engagements, research opportunities. And I still need to pass my xenoarchaeology course, Kayla said dryly. Speaking of which, Professor, am I getting credit for this? Zethrador's eye stalks quivered with what might have been amusement. I believe we can arrange extra credit, possibly enough to excuse you from the final exam. Deal. 3 days later, Kayla stood in front of a hastily reorganized exhibit. The display cases remained, but the placard had been completely rewritten. Where it once read, "The Vanished Precursor Civilization, an Enigma of the Ancient Galaxy," it now stated, "The First Human Colonial Period, a Case Study in Civilizational Collapse and Recovery, 48,047,200 BCE. Her grandmother's documents had been authenticated. Multiple human historians had emerged from wherever human historians emerged from, all carrying their own pieces of the puzzle. Turns out, humanity had been sitting on evidence of the first colonial period for centuries, but it had been dismissed as mythology, misinterpreted as metaphor, or simply ignored because it seemed impossible. The academic establishment was having what could politely be called a collective meltdown. 3 major papers had been retracted. A dozen more were under review. Dr. Velkara had gone from mortified to energized, apparently deciding that being at the center of the biggest archaeological revision in recent history was actually good for her career, provided she leaned into it hard enough. The story had gone viral across the galactic net, Humans discovering they'd been spacefaring before and forgotten about it was apparently the kind of content that transcended species barriers. The memes were already spreading. Images of confused aliens with captions like, "When the primitive species has a longer space history than you." Kayla's favorite showed an ancient human astronaut with the text, "I was colonizing the Orion Arm before it was cool." Zethrador approached her as she studied the new exhibit. His eye stalks had regained their vigor, now waving with something resembling enthusiasm. "Your grandmother's journals have been fascinating reading," he said. "The level of detail your ancestor recorded, the self-awareness about what was going wrong." He knew they were failing and documented exactly why. "What did go wrong?" Kayla asked. "Abuela's documents talk about the collapse, but they're not super clear on the cause." "The usual suspects," Zethrador said. "Overexpansion, resource depletion, political fragmentation, and, this is the interesting part, a deliberate decision by a significant portion of the population to return to Earth and start over. It wasn't entirely a collapse. Some of it was choice. Your ancestors looked at what they'd built, decided it was unsustainable, and hit the reset button." "That's very human," Kayla said. "We're good at knowing when we've messed up. We're less good at not messing up in the first place." The journals suggest that the survivors who returned to Earth implemented cultural safeguards, taboos against rapid expansion, emphasis on sustainable growth, a determination to remember what went wrong, encoded in family histories, religious texts, cultural practices. Your family crest wasn't just decoration. It was a reminder. Kayla looked at the seal in the display case, her family's tree and stars preserved for 50 millennia. "Fortis et fidelis," strong and faithful. I always thought it meant like, be tough and loyal. But maybe it meant something else. Be strong enough to survive. Be faithful to the lessons learned. A message across time, Zethrador agreed. And it worked. Humanity rebuilt, slowly and carefully. When you returned to space, you did it differently, more cautiously, more sustainably, you learned. "Eventually," Kayla said, "we're still making plenty of mistakes. All species do. But most don't get a second chance. Your species failed at an interstellar level, maintained enough continuity to remember why, and rebuilt with that knowledge intact. That's extraordinary." A group of students, the next xenoarchaeology class, was entering the hall. Kayla recognized some of the species from her own cohort. They were all staring at the revised exhibit with expressions of shock, confusion, and what might have been respect. "I should go," Kayla said. "I've got a paper to write about the importance of primary sources and actually talking to people from the cultures you're studying." "I look forward to reading it," Zethrador said. "And Cadet Martinez, thank you for being observant, for being persistent, for reminding us that sometimes the answer to a mystery is simply asking the right person." Kayla nodded and headed toward the exit. Behind her, she could hear the next tour beginning, Zethrador's voice taking on the lecturing tone she'd become familiar with. "The first human colonial period represents a unique case in galactic history," he was saying. "A civilization that achieved interstellar travel, encountered catastrophic failure, and successfully rebuilt over the course of 50,000 years. What makes this particularly remarkable is the cultural continuity maintained through the collapse, as evidenced by the Martinez family crest, which you see here. Human families preserved their histories and symbols across unimaginable spans of time." Kayla smiled and kept walking. Her phone buzzed. A message from her grandmother. "Mia, I'm being interviewed by the Galactic History Channel. They want to know about our family records. I'm famous. Also, eat something. Love you. She typed back, proud of you, abuela. Already ate. Love you too? Another message appeared, this one from her mother. Your cousin wants to know if we can sell merchandise with the family crest now that it's historically significant. I told him absolutely not, but he's already designed t-shirts. Kayla laughed. Of course he had. Humanity had colonized the stars, lost everything, crawled back from the brink of extinction, maintained cultural continuity across 50,000 years. And now they were going to put it on t-shirts. It was possibly the most human response imaginable. She reached the station's central plaza, where species from across the galaxy mixed and mingled, going about their daily business. A Valorian floated past, reading a datapad about the revised exhibit. Two Dronthians were arguing about the implications for pre-contact human history. A Quarzan was already writing what looked like an academic paper, their stylus moving frantically across their device. Kayla found a bench and sat down, looking out at the stars through the plaza's transparent dome. Somewhere out there, scattered across 17 worlds, were the remnants of humanity's first attempt at galactic civilization. Archaeological sites that would need to be re-examined. Artifacts that would need to be recontextualized. Stories that would need to be rewritten. And somewhere out there, circling an average star in an unremarkable part of the galaxy, was Earth. Home to a species that had reached for the stars, been burned badly enough to retreat back to their homeworld, and then, after an almost incomprehensible span of time, had decided to try again. Fortis et fidelis indeed, strong enough to survive failure, faithful enough to try again. Kayla pulled out her phone and took a selfie with the stars in the background. She sent it to the family group chat with the caption, "Turns out we've been space people for a really long time. Who knew?" The responses came quickly. From her cousin, "Does this mean we're technically a legacy admission to the galaxy?" From her uncle, "I'm updating my tattoo, adding 50,000 years of tradition underneath." From her mother, "Very proud of you, mija. Now about those t-shirts." From abuela, "I told you all the family history was important. Did I not tell you?" "I told you." Kayla grinned and pocketed her phone. She had a paper to write, a reputation as that human who identified the precursor civilization to manage, and apparently a family merchandise empire to discourage. But first, she was going to sit here for a while and appreciate the absurdity of it all. The galaxy had spent decades studying humanity's ancient failures, cataloging them, theorizing about them, and building careers on the mystery of what happened to those advanced precursors who vanished so completely. And the answer had been, as it so often was with humans, we're still here. We've always been here. We just had to take a very long break to figure things out. The Institute's dramatic crystalline structure glittered above her, full of scholars and students studying the rise and fall of civilizations. They'd be studying humanity's story for decades now, analyzing how a species recovered from total collapse. What cultural mechanisms allowed such extraordinary continuity? What lessons could be learned? Kayla suspected the main lesson would be the same one humanity had learned the hard way 50,000 years ago. Civilization was fragile. Space was hard. And sometimes, the best thing you could do was admit failure. Go home and try again when you were ready. The galaxy was littered with species who tried and failed. The difference was, humans had failed, survived, and come back for round 2. She stood up, adjusted her institute uniform, and headed toward the residential section. She had class in the morning. Xenoarchaeology was still required coursework, even if she'd just rewritten a significant chunk of the curriculum. And she needed sleep. Behind her, the Hall of Lost Civilizations continued its work, now with one less mystery and one more example of why assumptions were dangerous in archaeology. The display cases gleamed under soft lighting, each containing pieces of galactic history. And in one case, recently relabeled, a family crest waited, a tree with 7 branches, 3 stars, and a motto that had survived the collapse of civilization itself. The Institute had thought it was studying lost aliens. They'd been studying humanity's rough draft. And somehow, improbably, beautifully, that felt exactly right. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses